The village lay between dust and dreams, where the sun painted golden streaks across cracked mud walls and the scent of earth and fire mingled in the morning air. Children ran barefoot along the narrow paths, laughing, while elders sat beneath the shade of ancient baobab trees, their eyes watching, judging, guiding silently. In this town, old ways still ruled. Every action was weighed against tradition, and the unspoken laws of honor and respect shaped every heartbeat. Amina moved quietly through the compound, her hands folded over her belly, her eyes gentle, yet alert to every whisper and glance. She greeted each neighbor with a nod, a smile, a soft word, earning the respect of many. Her kindness echoed like a gentle drumbeat through the community, a rhythm of humility and strength that few could ignore. Even in her quietness, there was a presence that spoke of endurance and resilience. She pressed her hands against her stomach, feeling the life that grew within her. Each kick and flutter reminded her of hope, yet fear lingered like shadows under the midday sun. "Little one," she whispered, "may you know a world kinder than mine, a life free from fear and pain." Her heart both swelled and sank, for the seed she carried was both a blessing and a burden she could not yet fully shield. Across the village square, Kofi strode with a proud gait, his name carried with reverence in public circles. Traders nodded as he passed, the elders offered silent respect. Yet inside the walls of their home, he was a different man. A glare could silence a room, a word could wound deeply. His pride was a fortress, his temper a shadow that haunted Amina's days. She had learned to measure her words, to tread lightly, yet always with hope that kindness might soften the storm within him. Their marriage had been a swift affair, arranged by elders who sought to secure alliances and blessings. The celebration was bright and loud, drums echoing into the night, yet whispers of Kofi's past trailed behind every cheer. Tales of anger, of pride too fierce to bend, whispered like a wind that no one could quite still. Even amid the blessing, there was unease, a seed of caution buried beneath gold and music. Amina had been taught the silent law of women: endure, obey, protect the family name, even if the spirit breaks within. She bowed to tradition, her obedience a shield against gossip, yet inside, her mind wandered. She dreamed of a day when her child would walk in freedom, when laughter could replace whispers, when love, not fear, would guide a family. At night, when the village quieted under a sky filled with stars, Amina held her belly and imagined a different tomorrow. She pictured a home filled with light, where her child could grow without shadows of anger, where women could speak without trembling. She promised herself that she would endure, but she would also prepare, to break the cycle, to sow a seed of courage alongside the life she carried. And so, in a village where dust settled over old ways and dreams flickered like candle flames in the wind, Amina moved through her days quietly, yet with a heart determined. She was gentle, humble, yet strong, a soul that would one day carry the weight of hope for generations yet unborn. Amina tended the small garden behind their home, her hands moving slowly through the soil. Each seed she planted felt like a prayer, a hope that the child she carried might grow in a world gentler than the one around her. She whispered softly, "Perhaps love can soften him, Kofi. Perhaps patience will reach the part of you that fear has hardened." Her voice trembled, but the faith in her heart was steady, like a river carving through stone. Mama Zola watched from beneath the shade of an old fig tree, her eyes sharp as hawk feathers. She had lived through many seasons and seen hearts both tender and cruel. "Amina," she said, her voice low but firm, "the wind carries more than whispers. It carries storms. You must be careful." Her gaze lingered on the path leading to the village, sensing the shadows that others ignored. She spoke in her usual way, cloaking her warnings in riddles and proverbs, as elders often did. "Beware the man who carries storms inside. No kindness can calm what pride and fear have built. The storm does not ask permission, it rages until the walls of your heart crack." Amina nodded, keeping her own thoughts quiet, but the words etched themselves into her soul. Whispers began to float on the wind, the voices of neighbors and distant relatives, stories of jealousy and doubt, carrying more venom than truth. Kofi's brow furrowed as the rumors reached his ears. "Why do they look at her that way? Why do they smile when they see her with that child?" he muttered, tension coiling in his chest like a snake ready to strike. The gossip planted seeds of suspicion, slowly twisting his love into a shadow of fear. One evening, he turned to Amina, his eyes darkened by doubt. "Tell me this child, it is mine, yes?" he asked, his voice sharp as a spear. Amina's heart sank, for the trust she had nurtured seemed to crumble before her. "Yes, it is yours," she whispered, though she could feel the distance between them grow. Words that should have been gentle became the first cracks in their fragile bond. Days passed, and Amina felt the invisible chains of his control tighten around her life. No doors barred her, no locks chained her arms, yet every choice she made was measured against his temper, every movement shadowed by suspicion. She walked softly, spoke softly, her laughter constrained, her spirit bending beneath the weight of his gaze. At night, she knelt by her small hearth, hands clasped over her growing belly, torn between two worlds. "Must I obey, as the elders say? Or must I rise, for the life I carry and the woman I am?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but the question burned within her like coals. The struggle between tradition and self, duty and freedom, seemed endless, yet even in the dark, she clung to hope, a quiet flame that refused to die. And so the village moved around her, the dust rising in golden waves, the wind carrying rumors and warnings, the elders watching silently. Amina's heart held the tension of a woman who loved, yet feared, who endured, yet dreamed. In the silence between the beats of her own pulse, she vowed to let neither the storm of her husband nor the weight of tradition extinguish the courage she carried for herself and the child within. The morning sun filtered through the small windows of their home, casting long shadows over the earthen floor. Amina moved quietly, her voice gentle as she greeted Kofi, hoping the day might bring a moment of peace. "Kofi, would you like your tea now?" she asked softly, placing the cup before him. He glanced up, eyes cold. "Why do you always speak as if I am blind, Amina? Do you think I do not see your mistakes?" His words struck her like sharp spears, each one leaving a bruise on her spirit. What had once been gentle conversations, warm laughter, and shared smiles had begun to twist into a language of insult, cutting deeper with every passing day. Outside, the village hummed with life, yet Amina felt herself shrinking into the corners of her home. Kofi's presence became a wall, isolating her from friends and neighbors. Where once she had shared laughter with women at the market, she now walked alone, her footsteps muffled by fear and caution. Visits from her mother or cousins became rare, each one intercepted with a cold glance or a pointed excuse. The home she had imagined as a sanctuary became a cage, where the only sounds were the echoes of tension and suppressed grief. The elders watched, as they often did. Their eyes, wise and weathered, saw the unraveling, yet their silence spoke louder than words. Tradition demanded that wives endure, that family honor be preserved, even when hearts broke and spirits ached. They shook their heads, murmured prayers, but spoke no warning to Kofi. Justice, in the eyes of the village, was not found in confrontation, it was hidden in endurance. Amina bowed her head to the weight of unspoken laws. "I must remain obedient," she whispered to herself in the dim evening light, feeling the ache in her chest. She swallowed her pain, keeping it tightly wrapped beneath her ribs, though every heartbeat reminded her of her suffering. Yet within her, a flicker of light refused to be snuffed out. She pressed her hands against her swelling belly, feeling the small, rhythmic movements of the child within. "You will not know this darkness," she promised, her voice trembling yet firm. Her unborn child became her anchor, the reason she could bear the relentless cruelty. Kofi paced the room, muttering under his breath, a man whose pride had turned to poison. "This child, what right has it to change my life? Must I bend to it, or must it bend to me?" His eyes, once warm with affection, now reflected suspicion and fear. Fatherhood, once a promise of joy, had become a threat to his ego, a mirror that revealed his deepest insecurities. As whispers floated from the market and neighbors' homes, rumor and gossip seeded doubt in Kofi's mind. He questioned Amina's every word, watched her movements with growing suspicion, and turned small gestures of care into imagined betrayals. Truth and falsehood blended like dust in the wind, clouding his judgment and twisting love into control. Night fell like a heavy blanket over the village, thick and suffocating. Amina sat by the hearth, listening to the low rumble of Kofi's anger as it built inside him. Words that had once comforted now rose like thunder between them, shaking the walls and the heart. "You speak too freely, Amina. Who have you been with today?" Kofi's voice cracked with accusation, the storm of jealousy and suspicion spilling into the room. I only went to the well," she stammered, fear rising with every heartbeat. "Do not lie to me. Do you think I am blind to the whispers?" Do you think this child is mine?" His words were jagged, flung with the force of all the doubts and rumors that had taken root. Amina's hands trembled over her belly. "Kofi, I swear it is yours," she pleaded, her voice a fragile shield against the storm. But the words barely touched the walls he had built around his heart. The night had become a battlefield, and in the quiet village between dust and dreams, love had begun to unravel, replaced by fear, doubt, and the first shadows of destruction. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the courtyard, but it could not illuminate the storm brewing within Kofi. His hands trembled, and his eyes burned with suspicion, though there was no proof, no whisper of betrayal but what he imagined. You think you have been unfaithful," he spat, his voice a jagged edge in the still night. "How can I trust the child in your womb when your eyes hide secrets from me?" Amina's voice was small, fragile as a bird caught in a sudden wind. "Kofi, I swear nothing has happened. The child is yours. I have loved you, as I always have." But his pain, a shadow from a past no one dared speak of, twisted love into something dark. Memories of his father's cruelty, of streets where trust meant death, rose unbidden. Anger became instinct, suspicion became law. His hands shook as he reached for the bottle that had sat idle on the shelf, now an instrument of his fear. The liquid hissed as it spilled, a serpent of fire that found flesh. Time slowed. It was fire without flames, burning skin and soul alike, leaving more than scars. It burned dignity, shattered trust, and seared innocence. Amina screamed, a sound that pierced the night and stretched into eternity, a cry that shook the ancestors themselves. The walls seemed to bend under the weight of agony, and even the wind seemed to pause to hear it. She fell to the earth, a broken spirit folding in on itself. Her hands clutched at nothing, at the belly that had been a source of hope, now trembling with terror. The ground felt cold against her burning skin, but the fire inside could not be cooled. Darkness seeped into her eyes as consciousness fled. By dawn, the village awoke not to the usual chorus of roosters and children's laughter, but to whispers of horror. The compound was silent, the air thick with disbelief. "Did you hear what happened to Amina?" a neighbor murmured, eyes wide with fear. I cannot believe Kofi would do such a thing." Others shook their heads, choosing instead to cast blame on the wounded. "She must have provoked him," one said softly, voice tight with shame. "For a woman to survive in this world, she must know her place." Yet even as whispers swirled like dust in the sun, truth lay heavy and unspoken. Fear had wrapped itself around the village heart, shielding reputation over justice, protecting the image of a man who could do no wrong. And so the silence endured, a wall between what was done and what must be faced, leaving the echoes of her suffering to ripple unseen, unheard, and yet impossible to forget. The elders sat in a circle, their faces carved with lines of years and unspoken knowledge, yet their eyes, heavy with hesitation, avoided the truth. Mama Zola rose, her voice sharp and unwavering. "We cannot sit in silence while the fire burns a child alive," she said, every word striking like a drumbeat through the compound. "A life demands action, not whispers behind doors." The villagers stirred uneasily. Whispers fluttered like startled birds. "But Kofi is respected," one murmured. Mama Zola's gaze pierced through them. "Respect does not justify cruelty. Justice must speak, even when tradition is afraid." Amina was carried away that very night, blankets wrapped tight around her trembling form. The city awaited, a world of stone and steel, far from the ochre dust of the village, where the scent of millet and smoke once grounded her. She clutched her belly, feeling the pulse of the life within, a seed of hope threatened by despair. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "We are leaving, but we will not leave hope behind." Kofi watched, chest tight with pride and denial, masking guilt with arrogance. "She is mine," he muttered to himself, "and yet she flees in fear. Let them think what they will. I am not a man to be questioned." His eyes hardened, and in that moment, his ego became a wall, separating him from responsibility, from shame, from redemption. The city rose before Amina like a different world, walls taller than she had ever imagined, cars roaring like wild beasts, and strangers whose eyes were quick and unreadable. Tradition, once a warm blanket, felt distant, replaced by cold modernity. She felt small, unanchored, yet the life inside her pressed insistently, a reminder that she must endure. In this unfamiliar place, Dr. Kamau awaited, a healer known for repairing not just flesh, but the silent stories of those who had suffered. His hands moved with precision, yet carried a gentleness rare in a world hardened by cruelty. "We will take this journey together," he said, his voice calm, a balm to her frayed nerves. "Step by step, we restore what was broken." Each treatment demanded endurance. Bandages, medications, and surgeries tested her body and spirit, pushing her to the edge of despair. She stared into mirrors, seeing a face that no longer felt her own, a reflection that frightened as much as it healed. "Who am I now?" she whispered in the sterile room. Dr. Kamau placed a steady hand on hers. "You are still you. We are only helping the world remember what your soul already knows." As the days bled into nights, Amina learned that healing was not a moment but a path. Each incision, each stitch, each wave of pain carried her closer to wholeness. She faltered, she cried, yet in the spaces between tears, she discovered a resilience she had not known, a strength born of both suffering and hope, ready to rise against the shadows of the past. Amina lay on the narrow hospital bed, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, feeling the tiny, restless movements of the life she carried. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and yet a sharper pain gnawed at her heart. "Will my child see the sun without knowing fear?" she whispered into the sterile quiet, her voice trembling. The thought of passing on her suffering haunted her more than the scars on her skin. Every heartbeat of the unborn child was a reminder of what she had endured, and what she still had to protect. The shadows of that night, the words, the cruelty, the betrayal, clung to her, weaving into her dreams even here. She flinched at the echo of voices in her mind, the rage and suspicion of Kofi lingering like smoke in a room long emptied. The pain beneath her skin was nothing compared to the wounds in her soul, the silent tremors of memory that refused to settle. Tears traced paths down her cheeks, a map of trauma too deep for medicine alone to heal. Dr. Kamau entered quietly, his presence calm yet commanding. He knelt beside her bed, lifting her hand with gentle care. "Amina," he said softly, "we will mend what the world has tried to break. Not just the face, not just the body, but the spirit as well." His gaze did not linger on scars or burns. It lingered on her eyes, searching, recognizing, acknowledging the life that remained fierce within her. A strange familiarity stirred within him as he worked, an echo from another time, a story long buried. He adjusted her pillows, spoke soothing words, each syllable carrying reassurance, a balm to her frazzled nerves. "You have endured more than most," he said, "but endurance does not mean surrender. You are rising, even now." His hands were skilled, but it was his patience, his care, that began to knit the frayed edges of her courage. Day by day, Amina learned the rhythm of resilience. Small victories, a smile returning in the mirror, the gentle movement of her child, became acts of defiance. She could not erase the past, but she could shape the future. "I will live," she told herself, pressing a hand to her belly. "Not just to survive, but to rise. My child will know strength, not sorrow. We will break the cycle together." And in that vow, whispered into the quiet hum of the hospital, Amina reclaimed a measure of power that no cruelty could steal, the promise that her child would inherit courage, hope, and dignity. Even amid the shadows of suffering, even as scars remained, the seed of defiance, of life, had taken root, and it would not be silenced. Amina lay on the crisp hospital bed, the white sheets feeling both foreign and protective beneath her. Today was the day she would face the last trial, the final surgery that promised to carve a new life from the ashes of the old. Her heart pounded in her chest like the drum of a village ceremony, a rhythm of fear and hope intertwined. She whispered softly to the life growing within her, "We cross together, my little one. We will see the sun again." The operation room smelled of antiseptic, sharp and clean, but to Amina it carried the weight of destiny. Each step toward the operating table felt like wading into a river that carried both pain and rebirth. Nurses moved with quiet precision, and Dr. Kamau's calm voice anchored her trembling spirit. "We will guide you across," he said gently, placing a hand over hers. "Through this river, you will be renewed." The metaphor was not lost on her. She imagined herself floating, carried by currents of unseen strength, leaving behind the wreckage of terror and betrayal. As the anesthesia began to blur the edges of reality, Amina felt her mind drift, but her spirit clung to the promise of renewal. When she awoke, the reflection in the mirror startled her. The face that had once known fire and sorrow now bore the marks of survival, a new identity forged through endurance and care. She traced her fingers lightly over the contours of her healed skin, a map of battles fought and overcome. "I am still me," she whispered, yet the words carried a resonance of transformation, as if the very air acknowledged her rebirth. Dr. Kamau observed quietly, a subtle unease shadowing his usual confidence. Knowledge had brought him skill, but the patterns forming in his mind felt heavier than textbooks and procedure notes. Marks on her skin, the faint curve of a scar, the subtle slope of a healed wound, spoke of stories the mouth could never tell. His hands, steady in the operating room, now trembled slightly as memories whispered from deep within, forcing him to question timelines and records that had once seemed clear. Piecing together medical files, dates, and subtle physical signs, Dr. Kamau felt threads of fate tighten around him. Something hidden in time, long buried, now pressed insistently at the edges of his mind. A face, a scar, a name once lost, his daughter. The child he had mourned, whose memory had dulled with grief, now stood before him in living form. Amina's survival was no longer only her own, it echoed a story of loss, hope, and reunion. The scars that had carried silence now spoke loud truths, connecting the past with the present, and guiding them both toward a reckoning that destiny had long prepared. Amina stirred beneath the soft hospital lights, her eyes fluttering open to see Dr. Kamau standing nearby, a stack of medical files trembling slightly in his hands. His usual calm was gone, replaced with a storm that mirrored the one in her own soul. "Amina," he whispered, voice tight with disbelief, "these records, they tell a story I have long feared. You are my daughter." Her breath caught in her throat. Words hovered, fragile as morning mist. "Father," she asked, voice barely audible, uncertain if the sound matched the truth. The room seemed to pause, the steady hum of machines falling silent, as if even the world needed to acknowledge the revelation. Dr. Kamau's hands shook as he reached for hers, guilt and regret etched deep into his weathered face. "I left you," he murmured, tears glimmering like dew on a withered leaf. "All those years. I searched, but the fates, they tricked me. My absence has haunted me, but now you are here." Amina's mind swirled. The man who had stitched her broken skin, who had guided her through rivers of pain and despair, was the one she had longed for without knowing. She pulled back slightly, disbelief and sorrow mingling. You saved me, but why did you leave? Why did you hide?" "It was never hiding," he said, voice breaking. "It was the weight of fear and shame, the same currents that carried you far from me. But now, we are bound again, by blood and by destiny." In that instant, the healer and the broken became one. The distance of years vanished, replaced by a fragile bond rewritten by fate. Amina's mind struggled to reconcile the truth. Her savior was also her father. The same hands that had nurtured her rebirth now revealed a personal legacy she could scarcely comprehend. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she whispered, "All this time, all my suffering, it brought me to you?" Dr. Kamau nodded, a single tear tracing a path of both mourning and joy. "Yes, my child. The fire that tried to destroy you has led me back to you. Blood recognizes blood, and no cruelty or fate can break what is destined to reunite." Outside, the village lay under the soft glow of the rising sun, unaware that inside these walls, history had reversed its course, and a story of loss and healing had finally come full circle. Amina's shattered reality quivered under the weight of salvation, but within it, a deeper truth whispered, that identity, suffering, and love were threads of the same enduring tapestry, woven by hands both human and divine. The contrast could not have been more vivid. Kofi, who had sought to destroy, now seemed a shadow compared to the man who had restored life, face, and soul. Fire had burned where hands of malice moved, yet healing had come where hands of compassion dared to linger. Blindness had caused ruin, but truth revealed a path toward clarity. And through it all, Amina realized the wisdom of suffering. Pain had shown her what eyes alone could never see: the depth of destiny, the resilience of blood, and the power of love unbroken by time or tragedy. Amina sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her body still fragile, but her mind a storm of tangled emotions. She felt herself divided, victim of a violence she had endured, daughter rediscovered after years of absence, and mother carrying a new life that demanded her courage. Each identity weighed heavily, pressing down on her chest like the midday sun on the village clay. Tears fell silently, not for what could be seen, but for the sorrow lodged deep in her heart. No words could carry the grief, the confusion, the relief, and the lingering fear. She whispered to herself, "How can one soul hold so much?" The question lingered, unanswered, echoing in the sterile room like the songs of the ancestors. Dr. Kamau knelt beside her, his own eyes glimmering with sorrow and hope. "Amina," he said gently, voice shaking, "I have no right to ask for forgiveness for the years lost, only for the chance to be here with you now." His hands hovered, hesitant, wanting to reach but respecting the walls she had built around her heart. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the faint, insistent movements of the child within. "This life, this little one," she murmured, "is a promise that pain does not define the world. There is still hope, still a path forward." Her voice gained strength as her heart pulsed in rhythm with her unborn child, each beat a reminder of resilience and continuity. Amina closed her eyes, standing at a crossroads of fate. She could allow bitterness and anger to consume her, like a fire that leaves only ashes behind, or she could embrace the new truth, fragile though it was, and step into a life remade by survival and love. She inhaled slowly, letting the weight lift slightly, like a river easing over stones, guiding her toward calm. A subtle shift began, almost imperceptible at first, a turning of the soul toward acceptance. Chains forged by pain and silence loosened, and for the first time in years, she felt a measure of peace settle in the hollow spaces of her heart. Outside, in the village, whispers began to stir as news traveled faster than the wind. The tale of Amina's endurance, her rediscovered lineage, and the life she carried spread among the neighbors. Eyes widened with awe, heads shook with sorrow and admiration, and the elders murmured among themselves, knowing that the story of one woman's survival could ripple through the village like a lesson long awaited. Amina opened her eyes again, feeling the strength of her journey and the quiet power of the choices she had made. She was not just a survivor, she was a daughter, a mother, and a woman reborn. Her story, like the river and the wind, would travel far, carrying the echoes of pain, hope, and the wisdom of endurance. The moment came when the masks could no longer hide the darkness within. Kofi's lies and violence, once whispered behind closed doors, were now laid bare before the compound. Eyes that had once held him in reverence now widened with horror and disbelief. No longer could his polished smile or commanding voice shield him. The truth had stripped away the respect he had so carefully worn like armor. The elders gathered under the shade of the ancient baobab, their faces lined with years of wisdom and regret. The village watched as justice, slow but certain, began to take its form. Voices rose and fell like the wind through the trees, carrying both accusation and sorrow. "He cannot hide from what he has done," one elder said, voice trembling but firm. "The heart that harms must answer before the eyes of the village." Kofi stood rigid, the weight of his cruelty pressing down upon him. For the first time, he felt the consequences of his actions not as rumors or threats, but as the gaze of a community that had once honored him. The elders spoke, words measured and heavy, reminding him of the law of their land, the balance of justice, and the responsibility that comes with power. Silence filled the spaces between sentences, a silence that spoke louder than any scolding, a silence that revealed how long the village had turned its gaze away, allowing suffering to grow unchecked. From the crowd, Amina emerged, no longer bowed by fear or sorrow. She walked steadily into the sunlight, each step a quiet defiance. Her scars, once a source of hidden pain, now shone like marks of survival, a testament to a soul that refused to break. Villagers paused, recognizing not just a healed body, but a spirit reclaimed. "She walks among us stronger than ever," whispered one mother, her eyes glistening. Her face, transformed and unbowed, became a symbol not of what was taken from her, but of what she had endured and overcome. The strength in her gaze silenced the murmurs of revenge and replaced them with reverence for dignity. Amina's heart, once weighed by fear and anger, now chose peace over hatred, independence over submission. In a quieter corner, Dr. Kamau watched, a mixture of awe and relief in his eyes. The bond between father and daughter, once lost to fate and time, began to mend through shared truth, compassion, and recognition of their intertwined journeys. The healing of the body and the spirit had not only restored Amina, but it had begun to rebuild a family fractured by pain, showing that even in the deepest shadows, the light of resilience could return. Amina sat in the warm morning light of the village courtyard, the air carrying the scent of earth and fresh rain. Beside her, Dr. Kamau watched quietly, his presence a steady anchor against the years of absence and pain. Their hands brushed lightly as they exchanged words without the need for many. Love, though delayed, had grown in the spaces carved by loss. "I never thought we would reach this day," Amina whispered, her voice trembling yet full of life. He nodded, eyes glistening. "Time could not heal the past, but it has led us here, to each other again." When the cries of new life pierced the quiet of the compound, a hush fell over those who had gathered. Amina's baby had come, small yet fierce, a living testament to survival and hope. The village, once shadowed by suspicion and fear, now bent in reverence to the promise that this child carried, a story rewritten, a cycle of suffering broken. "This child," Mama Zola said softly, her voice steady as the wind through the baobab, "carries the strength of ancestors and the courage of the brave." Amina held her baby close, feeling generations of pain dissolve into the warmth of this new life. The birth was more than a beginning, it was a declaration. Chains forged by silence, fear, and injustice had been shattered. Where sorrow had ruled, laughter now found its place, and the child's tiny hands seemed to hold the power to reshape the village's future. Mothers whispered encouragement, elders bowed their heads in gratitude, and even the wind seemed to carry a blessing across the rooftops. Amina, standing tall, felt the weight of her scars transform into a mantle of resilience. The story of her journey spread, carried by the wind that knew all secrets. The villagers learned that silence in the face of wrongdoing is a crime as heavy as the original act. Courage, not dominance, brought true strength. Compassion, not fear, shaped a better tomorrow. And in the sunlight, Amina's face, once shadowed by sorrow, now luminous with truth and love, reflected the essence of renewal. Holding her child to her heart, she became a symbol of hope, proof that from ashes, identity and life could rise anew, and that the brave who heal themselves also light the way for others.